And good afternoon. I'm here this afternoon with Jill Speering, who is the author of a book called Rubies in the Rubble, and who was also the architect of the Facebook page for Reading Recovery. So we're going to have an interview with her, and we're going to talk about all those things and more. Let's begin by asking you, Jill, to give us a little bit about your professional background and anything else you think it's important for us to know, and then we'll get into those other things. So, Jill, take it away.
All right. Well, Dr. Sam, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to see you and answer questions and talk about the things that we love most, literacy. So do you want me to talk about my background first?
Oh yeah, especially your professional background.
Yes.
This is my blog has an awful lot of readers who are teachers, so they want to get to know you. Can you teach? I think you can, but kind of let's let my readers know about that. And not only can you teach, but you can also teach teachers. But
Yes.
we'll get into that in a minute. So go ahead and tell us about your professional background there.
Yes. Well, let me start by saying that as a child, as a teacher, I didn't want another child to feel like I felt as a child growing up. And so when I got into the classroom, I thought I'd be able to teach without any problem, but some of my kids were falling through the cracks early on. So this gave me the impetus to seek out professional development and try to find anything I could find to improve my teaching, because I felt like if a child was failing in my classroom, or if a child was falling between the cracks in my classroom, it was my responsibility. It wasn't that there was something wrong with the child, something wrong with the parents, none of that. It was about my teaching. So I took full responsibility for that. And so I got into a master's program and in reading, and it completely changed my life. I learned how to teach children by focusing on what they could do and letting them write in order to learn to read. And they would write in invented spellings, and then I would publish their writings. So I eventually did an action research and did a case study on a first grade repeater, and that case study was published in a national reading journal called Reading Horizons. And then I presented this study at the International Reading Association, the IRA conference, National Council of Teachers of English, the College Reading Association, and so this really became an avenue for me to become a better teacher. And then I just could not get enough learning. I wanted more and more and more. So I went to
Consummate teacher, yes.
right, yearning for more expertise. And so I started working on a doctorate. I didn't finish my doctorate, but I started working on a doctorate at Vanderbilt. And then they gave me our student teachers to work in my inner city classroom. And so that was wonderful. And the way we were able to communicate, in a first grade classroom, so much is going on, and you really don't have time to talk to another adult. So we started journals. So I would write things in the journal. I had a journal, I gave her a journal, and I would write, explain different reasons that I had made decisions, or explain things to her through my writing. And then she would, read that, respond to it, ask questions. So we had, a compilation of journals, which we ended up presenting at another conference through Vanderbilt. It was in California, CRA, College Reading Association. And so then in 1994, I was chosen to go to Ohio State and become a reading recovery teacher leader. I had never seen a reading recovery lesson. So, but I taught reading recovery for 15 years. And during that time, we had 3 directors of school and 1 interim. So I worked with 4 directors of school during that time. And during between 1999 and 2005, I presented at the Reading Recovery Conference. That's what it was called in those days. Now it's called LitCon. And I presented at the Reading Recovery Conference 4 different times. And then I decided that, well, let me say, during that time that I had reading recovery for 15 years, my largest number of teachers in the site and the metro schools has got about 700,000, 700,000 people in Nashville. It's approaching 1 million now, but in those days it was about 700,000. And yet I only had I only had about 35, 36 teachers at the apex of my teaching career. And we had 74 elementary schools. So, when I got ready to retire, I wanted to have a teacher leader to take my place. But the director of schools would not meet with me. And I don't know that he had anything against me. He just was busy, and he just never met with me. So I went to the mayor, whom I had invited to see Reading Recovery when he was a candidate. And so he and I became friends, and he was very supportive. When he would speak in public, he would talk about Reading Recovery. And so when I got ready to retire, I went to him and said, I'd like to have 2 teacher leaders to take my place. We've got a large district. There's a lot of work to be done. And he picked up the telephone, and within 2 minutes, he had raised enough money to train 2 teacher leaders.
Okay,
So,
I'm going to cut you off there because now you're starting to get into the book.
okay.
And that's going to be 2 questions down. So,
Okay.
wow, what a background, and wow, just a teacher's teacher and a teacher of teachers, and that's so neat. And I'm sure, in that idea of journaling with the person in your room, boy, that is so powerful. So we'll talk about that more. Well, we'll talk about that in the blog entry itself. Okay, let's just do a quick look at another little project of yours, and that is you are the creator of the Facebook page for Reading Recovery. I'm going to share the screen with you now, which will let you see that. And we just need a minute or 2. I know you're no longer in charge of it, but I'm going to share the screen, I hope. If I do this technology right, I will. Let's see, share screen. I did it right. I'm surprised at myself. Okay, so I want to point out to my readers, look at the number of members, 6,000 members, and Jill got that up from 0. So and she ran it for years. That's how I first met her, by the way, and she turned it over. But the big things here are, this is a site for reading recovery teachers. So you have to join. Well, now I'm starting to steal your thunder. Tell us all about it very quickly. And I'll tell you what, these are 6,000 very active people still today, thanks to you. So brag about yourself a little bit, and also tell us about this site.
Yes, as we started this in 2011, and I wanted a place for my teachers to be able to communicate, and to help the more experienced teachers to help the more novice teachers. And so I started this site and this page, and so we had about 20 teachers on it at first, and then
It's a lot less than 6,000, huh?
yes. Well, then it was interesting because Vanderbilt professors, I had a few Vanderbilt professor friends, and they said, can we just get on it and watch and listen to your discussions, because we want to learn from Reading Recovery. So, we won't post. And I said, okay. So they joined, and then I started having requests from Reading Recovery teachers outside Nashville, across the state, and then more teachers began to ask to be a part of this page across the U.S. and Canada and New Zealand. And by the time that I handed it over to Reading Recovery Council of North America, we had 4,000 members. So in 10 years, it went from 0 or 20 maybe to 4,000 members.
And now they've got it up to 6,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted you to be able to brag about this project because it's all you, and it's how I met you. And it's a place for Reading Recovery teachers to talk about things. And, it's basically a teaching site. From time to time, I still am reminded of things I'd forgotten, or, you ask a question and you get answers from practicing teachers and from teacher leaders and all the rest. So kudos to you for creating this. I'm going to stop the share now and move right into the big thing. And if I could get you to hold your book up.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to talk about your book in two perspectives. The first is your book as a memoir and all that you talked about. And the next is your book as a perspective of your fight to keep Reading Recovery alive in Nashville. And I'd like to hear both of those stories, starting with, this, in many, many ways, this is a very well-written memoir. So tell us about your memoir, please, part of it first.
Absolutely. Well, the book is called Rubies in the Rubble, An Educator's Transformation from Pain to Prominence, from Abuse to Absolution. And it's divided into 3 sections. The first section is about my childhood, and what's important about my childhood is that the events of my childhood became the impetus for me to become an educator and teach children like me. And so the second part of the book is about my teaching career, and the way I was able to teach children to read through writing, and then the third part of my book is about there's a section of my book about my training in Reading Recovery and the ups and downs of that training year, and all Reading Recovery teachers can relate to that. I've written several poems that I've included in that section, and then the third part of the book is more about setting up a site and how that works and what the pros and cons and the difficulties of that are, and then working with directors of schools. We had so many different directors of schools, and
okay, and that provides the perfect segue. I hope my readers are noticing that I'm changing back to split screen to alert them and me that we've now changed topics. We've talked about the memoir part of your book, and by the way, teachers, it's really worth it. And teacher leaders, it's really worth it to read it. It's inspiring, just among other things, and informative. But now we get into, you had to fight, you had a giant fight around the whole business of Reading Recovery. And tell us about that. And I'm especially interested in the fact that this person who seemed to be very critical of Reading Recovery was almost like in 2 ways about it. One way he's critical, and the other way it was like, oh, we want all these Reading Recovery teachers. Okay, so I shouldn't have. I'm stealing your thunder here. Take it away. Tell us about that whole set of incidents.
Yes. Well, when we had this, I was on the board at this point, and let me go back to after I retired from teaching, and we lost reading recovery when I retired. Even though I had trained two new teacher leaders, or we had trained in Ohio two new teacher leaders, the problem was that when they came back, they taught 20 teachers. And the next year, I was working part-time, and the budget had to be cut. So when the budget was cut, the director of schools, who had not previously wanted to meet with me, cut the two teacher leader positions, which virtually did away with reading recovery. And one of the teacher leaders went on to do work in reading recovery, and the other one decided to raise a family. So we had completely lost any hope of getting reading recovery at that time. So I stayed at home for a year, and then I was approached to run for the school board. And because I had done so much work in the community, inviting people to come and see reading recovery, councilmen, councilwomen knew my name. So they approached me and asked me if I'd be willing to run. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have no idea how to run for office. I'm an educator, I'm not a politician. But then I thought, oh gosh, I could bring reading recovery back, or maybe I could bring reading recovery back. So I ran for office against all odds, won. There's a lot of outside money, a lot more money than I had raised. But because I was out knocking on doors and probably outworked my opponents, I won the race. And then I met with the director of schools, who was not willing to meet with me previously. And so he asked me what I wanted, and I said, I want a comprehensive literacy program. We've got a mishmash of hodgepodge of programs, and they actually conflict with one another. And he said, okay, you write it. We'll get a committee together and you write this comprehensive literacy program. So I did. And of course it had reading recovery in it. And so within 3 years, we trained two teacher leaders. And then after they came back, within 3 years, we had 80 reading recovery teachers.
Oh my, wonderful.
4 teacher leaders, and I was like, oh my goodness, this job is worth it. And then that director of schools retired, and we interviewed several people. It was a national search, and so when we interviewed Sean Joseph, he sang the praises of reading recovery. Oh, it's a wonderful program. And he was from Prince George's. So he was from the largest reading recovery site in North America. And I called people in Prince George's and said, what do you think about him? And they said, we don't have anything negative to say. And on his second interview, may I read his comment? It's just a couple of sentences.
Sure.
And on his second interview, he said, let me see if I can move this over. Here we go. He said, I'm a believer in reading recovery. We had over 100 teachers in my previous district. They are thriving. They're making an impact on the neediest schools. He even talked about Vygotsky, Lev Vygotsky. All reading recovery teachers know who that is, and the zone of proximal development. So I thought, this guy knows his stuff. So we hired him, and very excited about him, but things began to go awry right away. I mean, he had I won't go into all the details, but in terms of reading recovery, the first year that he was there, we were supposed to train 20 teachers, and we had 20 teachers in the budget, and we had all of them filled except 9, and he froze that. He froze that hiring, and So that was the first red flag. And then I was lucky enough to serve as the vice chair of the Metro Nashville School Board with 87,000 students. And I was also able to serve as the budget chair. And that is a powerful position to be in. And during that time, we presented our budget to the Metro Council. And during that time, Dr. Joseph said, we're going to continue our investment in reading recovery, which is one of America's most well-researched reading interventions. If you have not had the opportunity to see it in action, we strongly recommend that you come visit one of our schools and see the magic that those teachers do with one-on-one intensive instruction. So, I'm just experiencing such a high from this new director. And that was we hired him in 2016. That was in 2017. And then I wanted to follow up on his invitation to invite these council members to come and see Reading Recovery. So I asked him to write a letter, which didn't happen. So I wrote a letter, and a segment of that letter says, the goal of Reading Recovery is to dramatically reduce the number of first grade students who have extreme difficulty learning to read and write. 100% of Reading Recovery students make progress. 67% can read at grade level within 12 to 20 weeks, which is only 30 to 50 hours of instruction. I took the letter to him. He signed it, sent it to Metro Council. We had lots of people to come in. A year later, things had really gone awry, and his administration was dotted with legal and ethical issues. And as the vice chair, I had to, hold him accountable, knowing that he had a propensity for retaliation. I had seen it with teachers, I'd seen it with administrators, and I thought, if he really wanted to hurt me, he would take Reading Recovery away. And that's exactly what he did. But the way he did it was in 2018, right before we presented our budget to the mayor. We had our final budget meeting. Now, we had about 30 Reading Recovery teachers, classroom teachers, parents to speak about Reading Recovery during the budget process. And but he decided, the way he sold it to the board was that he wanted to use these teachers back in the classroom because they could impact more students, which was absolutely untrue. In a classroom, you impact 20 students. In Reading Recovery, our teachers, each of them, were impacting 50 to 70 students with the group instruction. So that was not true, but I had a feeling that something was up. So I invited the Reading Recovery teachers to come to that meeting, and there were 50 in attendance. And when he presented his budget or his change in the budget to take the Reading Recovery teachers and put them back in the classroom, I asked the teachers, how many of you are willing to do this? Not one teacher raised her hand. And I talked to the board about, we're going to lose all this expertise that we have gained over the years. But the board would not budge. They, first of all, it was the 12th hour, and they went along with his
okay, idea. That's a good stopping point, because I want to have readers have something left to read in the book. Yes. So, but there is, before I go to the final thoughts about Reading Recovery, there is one more follow-up question. Now, I already know the answer, but I want my readers to hear this answer. And that is, now, wait a minute. Jill, reading recovery teacher handles 4 kids. Okay. How in the world can you have a teacher handling 4 kids and still impact 20 or 30? I know you know the answer. I know the answer, but my readers might not. Could you explain that?
Well, our teachers taught 3 rounds of the most intensive uh, instruction, which is reading recovery. And so they had 4 students at the beginning of the year around Christmas time. They would pick, or they picked up another 4. And March, April, they picked up another 4. So our teachers taught about, on the average, 11 reading recovery students, and 9 to 11, and then they taught in groups of students, and they might have 3 groups of 7, 8 children in the group, and those children were very fluid. Those groups were very fluid. So as children were making progress, they were able to move out, and same thing in reading recovery. It's very fluid. So as one child meets the benchmark, another child is picked up right away. So over the course of the year, our teachers were impacting a large number of students.
Okay. And would you repeat that last sentence you just said to make sure that I picked up on it instantly, but I'm not sure my readers would have. What's this about releasing kids? How does that
Yes,
happen?
yes.
Uh, and is this just saying, oh, we can't do any more for them? Or is this saying we've actually done a lot for them? We're ready for the next one. Explain that to my readers.
Yes, we have benchmarks that we want the children to perform in reading and writing at the average of the class, and so as students gain that benchmark, they are released back into the classroom. Now, not every child is about 67% of the children meet that benchmark in Nashville. Sometimes 70. One year I had 90%.
Wow.
Um, yeah, that was a really good year. But that 3rd round of students really made a major difference. But the students, um, even if the students are not don't meet the benchmark, then they were able to go into group instruction and continue to learn and gain skills in the group instruction. It's not as accelerated, of course, as reading recovery, nor as intensive.
Okay, and I think that was a beautiful explanation. Just one final thought here. Can you? Well, a full disclosure, I was reading recovery trained. I've been a reading recovery advocate for a very long time. Several blogs around that and all the rest. I'll make sure to put links to that in this blog so that people know. But it's a matter of the fact that it really can work done properly, and it really does have that kind of huge impact on things. So I guess my point here is that some of the that the data is there, and if people will, I'll make it a point to put a link to the blog where I tie to the national data. The data is there. The of real critics, the main critics I get is that the saying that it's too expensive. And done the way some people do it, it is too expensive. You don't impact enough people. Done the way you described, it is very effective and not all that expensive. So that all said, and thank you for allowing me to be on my soapbox for a moment.
Sure.
I think we've now reached that point where I say, I turn it over to you one last time and say, any final thoughts?
Well, let me say, to piggyback on your previous comments, that when I was a new teacher leader, the first 2 years, I worked. Your best friends in reading recovery it's the research department, and so I became friends with them, invited them to see reading recovery, and asked them to do. I kind of uh, uh, figured out what the way I wanted it done and approached them with my proposal. And they did a year study and this actually a 2-year study, and they discovered that that reading recovery had saved the district $330,000 in retention savings alone from before we had reading recovery to after we had reading recovery.
Oh, I do hope they publish that somewhere.
Yes, that's in my book, but that's
Oh,
just,
okay. Well,
yeah,
readers can find it in the book. Wonderful.
yes, yes, yes. That was it's just so important to be, be aware of what's going on in the research. And when we lost reading recovery, the research department was, of course, they had a new director, and they weren't willing to work with us. They wanted everything private, so we kind of lost that edge that we had had previously.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I think this is a great place to wrap it up. Would you hold your book up one more time, please?
absolutely.
Okay. So, folks in the blog, you really want to consider getting this book. Let me change our view over so I know we're ending up. You really want to read this book. It's a memoir. It's a blueprint for teacher leaders, I think, to put together a powerful reading recovery program. And at the end of the day, it's also a tribute to your whole academic, your whole career, your whole life. And the impetus here is, and sometimes we're just charged with, oh, we want to make money. Boy, anybody that thinks people are in the teaching business for making money, I don't think so. I think we're in there for making a difference, and you most certainly have. So, folks, Jill Speering and Rubies, help me, Rubies in the Rubble.
Rubble, yeah.
Okay, and now we've reached that final point in a Bommarito interview where we do something silly, and that is the goodbye wave, the Zoom wave goodbye. So let's say goodbye to our readers. Bye.
Bye.
And thank you all for listening, and consider looking or getting that book if you don't already have it. Bye bye.